Caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest journeys, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm Allison Schreier, and my experience caring for my husband inspired me to create Zinnia, a therapeutic streaming service designed to support people living with dementia and reduce caregiver stress. Our research-backed videos are engaging, easy to follow, and they help ease the daily challenges like agitation and anxiety so that you can focus on connection and joy. Available by subscription on mobile and TV apps, Zinnia makes every day a little bit easier. Go to zinniatv.com and sign up for a free trial today. Use the code RESOURCE for 15% off an annual Zinnia subscription.
And welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and I'm so excited that you're joining us today. We are going to have a fascinating conversation as usual as we learn from people all around the world at all ages and stages of life. Stay tuned as we shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort.
Here we go. What you think about, you will bring about.
Well, hi, everyone. This is Lori LeBay with Alzheimer Speaks, and I'm thrilled you can join us today. We are going to be talking, as usual, about dementia and caregiving. And today we have just a magnificent woman with us who has been in the industry, worked in the field for over 35 years, and she's now just published her first book, I believe it is, The Heart Remembers, and we will get more information out to you on this. But Mary Underwood is just absolutely incredible. So I cannot wait until we introduce her to you. But again, I would just appreciate you checking out Alzheimer Speaks. Go to all of our free educational resources. We have so many different kinds of things you can tap into, as well as Dementia Map, our sister company, where you can find global information as well. And, you know, maybe you're a provider of a service, product, or tool. We would love to have you be part of that as well. There are free as well as paid plans. So just reach out to me or go to dementiamap.com. So with no further ado, let's go ahead and introduce you to Mary. So Mary, I've been waiting for this conversation with you. I am so looking forward to exploring your book and your new business and what you're doing. You bring so much valuable experience to so many people, and I can't wait for my audience to hear from you directly. Mm-hmm. So again, first, welcome to the show.
Thank you. As always, it's always great spending time with you.
And then second, do you mind introducing yourself to our audience? You can do a much better job than I can.
No problem. I am Mary Underwood. I am by training and profession a social worker who has been working in the field of dementia care for 36 years now, and have just really been the focus of supporting families, organizations, and making the journey the best it could be for everybody involved. And started my own business last year to be able to do it a little more independently and without guardrails, and just to be there to support whoever is looking for and needs support.
I love the term without guardrails, because it's like, boy, we get put in a box sometimes, and it's like, in order to really serve the people, we have to listen to the people. We have to deliver what exactly they want, not what we think they need.
Yep.
And boy, it just allows us to get so much more creative and fun, and I think healthy for everyone involved.
Absolutely. You know, when your only obligation is to the client or the people that you're helping, it opens up a world of possibilities versus being locked into, I work for this company or that company. And it's just, you are the person I'm here to help. And whatever that looks like, we're going to do it together.
And don't you feel like you learn so much more? You know, I just learned so much from all the peeps that I work with and talk with. It's just incredible.
Absolutely. I learned so, people say to me all the time, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I want to say to them, no, thank you. You've taught me something new and something different. And just, having a variety of clients and new people all the time just makes it still fun and still just what I love doing.
Well, when you like doing your job, that's just a whole different vibe, because not too many people out there say that.
Oh, exactly. And I think we can say not only do we like our job, we love our job.
Yep, exactly.
But I do hope there's a day where I am out of a job, but I think that's a ways away. But in the meantime, I think we love what we do.
Yeah. Can you share with our audience if you've been personally touched by dementia? People are always interested. These professionals you have on, do they really know what it's like?
In all candidness, I did start in it professionally. I was 24 years old. So, my parents were young. My grandparents actually were still, pretty healthy in general. So for 25 years, I was doing this kind of work when in 2015, my dad was diagnosed. And my grandmother had multi-infarct dementia. I had an aunt who also had dementia. So I was touched personally, but when dad was diagnosed, it was like a slap in the face, and it became very different and very real when dad was diagnosed.
Isn't that interesting? I hear more professionals say, gosh, I've been given all this advice out, but I would do it differently now that I have been touched this closely and this personally, with the disease. Did you feel kind of some kind of turning point there, or did you feel pretty solid in everything that you were saying?
I actually felt kind of the opposite. Like, I think it almost reinforced, because I had always thought a certain way, again, human beings, autonomy, purpose, all these things is what I've preached for the last, 25 years before dad was diagnosed. And when, we started in the system, I just felt reinforced that, oh my gosh, thank goodness. Because I was very fearful that I would be thinking, I did everything wrong. But it really actually reinforced what I had believed for the first 25 years. So I think that's what made me even more passionate these last, 10 years.
Oh, that's nice. Because I've had people, and I'll never forget, and my audience has heard this before, but to me, it was just such a powerful situation. I was doing a keynote, and like 1,000 people in the room, and one guy in the front row, front table, just broke down sobbing. I mean, just uncontrollably sobbing as I'm talking, and I can't really stop or do anything. Yeah. And somebody got up and ran to the bathroom and actually brought a roll of toilet paper back for him, because he was just beside himself. And when I got done, I said, "Are you okay? And did I say something wrong?" And he's like, "No." He's like, "All of this makes sense." And he said, "But I've been an executive director for 21 years. And everything I've been telling people is so different from the realities of living with the disease." And he just felt this overwhelming guilt. And he's like, "But this is what I was trained to say and to do for all these years." And he's like, "But, walking in that path and being in the trenches was really, really different." And I hear that from so many people. So it's nice that your role, you got that before you had to, step into it personally.
And I was so grateful, because too, when we walked, I thought, oh my gosh, it's time now to walk the walk. And luckily I was able to do that. But I think part of why is, and many of the professionals that I've worked with, is that we know that what we're doing now is going to have to change. We're not locked into, this is the way it's always been, and this is how you have to do it. That we've always learned from each situation that has come across our way. And we're just always willing to look at things differently. So I think that has made it a little easier, that we're not locked into, these are the ways you have to do it. Because how we do it for your loved one is going to be very different than how you do it for mine. But that's always been my belief.
Yeah. And it's not just that the person diagnosed is different. It's because our situations are different. Our personality styles, our culture, all of those things.
Oh, our baggage, our family dynamics, our history, that all is part of this journey, good or bad.
Well, what made you decide to write your book, Mary?
I had no intentions of writing. I did not get into the dementia field to write a book and never thought I would. And it was the time we're all making bucket lists in our life. And, I threw on it, write a book. And then I think because of what we do and because we work with seniors, and I say I'm on the back nine of my career, that I wanted to say, I don't want to make this a dream anymore. I want to make it a reality. I want to not talk about it and just do it. Mm-hmm. And I just felt like, having been on both sides, it gave me a voice to be able to tell the stories a little bit different. And also from my trainings, when I do trainings, so many people have come up and said, oh, you should write a book. And, finally the, tsunami of me saying it to myself and other people, I just said, I'm going to do it. And if I sold one, I sold one. And it really was just about getting my perspective out to people, whoever wants to see it.
That's interesting. It's I love seeing all the books that are out there. I mean, I think of when my mom was diagnosed again over 40 years ago, or really it was 30, because the first 10 they kept telling her it was menopause. But there was nothing. I mean, there was just nothing out there, and there wasn't much for resources. And, there's so many opportunities. And I think the storytelling through real life experiences, and not just book smarts,
right.
And that mixture makes such a difference. And I think it's easier for people to digest.
Agree. And I think it's easier for people to relate to, because even, the thousands of people I've trained, the most common response I get from people is, you know what, that story you told about Joe really hit home, or that story really stuck with me. And what I've learned is that it was the stories that made the training successful. So if I can make these stories available to everybody, then it would be able to expand that training. And in a non-clinical way. There's a lot of wonderful books out there that will walk you through this disease from what happens in the brain. Mm-hmm. I wanted to walk the families and the caregivers and the person through the disease as it is in the heart and the emotional side behind it, which I think, again, makes it a little bit different. You're not going to read about plaques and tangles and all that. You're going to read about how, a resident, a client, a person with dementia felt when they couldn't drive anymore or when they got the diagnosis. So it's all about the heart.
Yeah, well, and I love some of your, titles. Someone stole my slippers. Today's my birthday. I mean, I have a friend right now who, he lives in a community, and I love him to death. And I coordinated getting a podiatrist in to do his feet. And so they come in and once a month do his feet. And I told Karen the other day, I said, no more reminder cards, because he has been calling myself, her, and everyone every day, and he's not sleeping because he doesn't have time orientation. And so he's up all night thinking that they're going to come and prepare, and then he's sleeping during the day. And I mean, all those little things that people don't really understand, why someone is repeating something, or with the stolen slippers. I think my mom always thought somebody was stealing, but she was gathering other people's stuff.
Right. She was, and I think too, and like we said, there's so many books out there that tell you, don't argue, go with the flow, live in the moment. But when you read the story about Lee and her stolen slipper, it now puts you into I see what that means. It makes it very relatable and understandable, because it's easy for one thing to say, live in the moment, but what does that mean? And what does that look like? And how do I live in the moment? And the stories just help us put those things that we should know into context that is much easier to understand. And with, Lee and her slipper, and maybe even chuckle and laugh a little bit, which is okay.
Yep. Oh, I love this one. Joe's an ass, and I mean, I think of sometimes with my mom, I mean, she just lost her filters, and she would just, I mean, she had a roommate one time who just had major digestive problems, and she'd go in the bathroom, and I mean, the whole floor stunk, not just my mom's poor room, and my mom would just, yell at her. It was like, we've got to, this is not fair to this poor woman. But my mom was like, what is wrong with her? And she,
and your mom, and even, the story Joe's an ass, was just what my dad said about a family member who was talking about my dad right in front of him, which is, that dad says Joe's an ass. And we all agreed, just like your mom, she was saying probably what everybody else was thinking, but she just said it.
Caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest journeys, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm Allison Schreier, and my experience caring for my husband inspired me to create Zinnia, a therapeutic streaming service designed to support people living with dementia and reduce caregiver stress. Zinnia offers research-backed videos intentionally created for people with dementia, engaging, calming, and easy to follow. Whether you need to ease agitation, create moments of joy, or make daily routines smoother, Zinnia is here to help. Family and professional caregivers use our content to turn challenges into opportunities for connection. Accessible by subscription on mobile devices and connected TVs, Zinnia is simple to use whenever you need it. Because when caregiving feels easier, life feels better. Go to zinniatv.com and sign up for a free trial today. Use the code RESOURCE for 15% off an annual Zinnia subscription.
So, yep. And just the verbiage, the attitudes, but being able to, like you said, to understand how something is handled or why it is triggered and why it is happening, and what can you do about it, and how do we look at it in a different perspective? So often, we just chart it up to, it's bad behavior, it's not polite, it's not this, and well, gosh, I don't want to be told I have a bad behavior all the time. Nobody does.
Right, and then handed a Seroquel to go with that bad behavior. So
exactly. And so many times it's really small little things that we can look at in the environment, that might be triggers, or it could be a person or a personality.
Right. And I think too much, the story about Lee and her slipper, for those who, I don't want to give too much away in hopes that people will buy the book, but, Lee took these pieces of a puzzle that were not part of the same puzzle, but she managed to somehow fit them together, which I just think is, again, brilliant. And, the goal too is that somebody reads that story, and it may not be, mom accused somebody of stealing her slipper, but oh my gosh, my mom accused a housekeeper of doing X, Y, and Z. And so there's a page for every story, so people can write how they connect with that story. So it, again, may not be Lee's slipper, but it might be mom's pocketbook or mom's robe or whatever it is, and that they can, again, journal, connect, and relate to those stories that are in the book.
I love that you gave that extra space in the book, and that it's larger type.
Yeah.
So it's easy to read. I think so often people have this teeny, tiny type, and that's it. It's just stressful on so many people's eyes.
Yeah.
And the stories are short and readable, and they just don't need an explanation. You know, where sometimes you read stuff and it's like, oh, what the heck did that mean?
Exactly. Yeah. And the stories, some of them you might be facing right now, because the very first one starts with us getting our diagnosis for Dad. So it starts in the very beginning, but there's stories throughout the whole journey. So the hope is that somebody reads a story and one can either relate to it, or they can go back and say, oh my gosh, this story didn't matter when I read it, but now I can go back. And that's why they have the catchy names, so that they may not remember exactly what it was, but it's that slipper. Let me look for the slipper story. And again, it's just a journey, and you can skip a story. You can go back to a story. It's just a book that keep on your nightstand, keep in the living room, that whenever you need inspiration, whenever something hits, just pick it up, write, read. Again, you can read 4 pages and you're done for a story, and that's it. Or some are 1.5 pages.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's really nice. And like you said, that they're personalized, they're real. I just think is so powerful.
They're very real, and most of the names are changed, obviously, but there's stories in there. There's several in there about Dad, and those are our names, and it's our story, and it's because they're real people. They're not like, oh, let's write about somebody who is paranoid. It's like, here's a story when it really happened, what actually happened, and let's make it real, not pretend what if scenarios.
Well, and they're not just that. I mean, it's everything around that incorporates life, so it's not, yeah, you're talking about the whole person and the whole on both sides.
A lot of it really is about the caregiver. And, it's, when it says the heart remembers, it's not just for the person with dementia's heart, but it's also about the caregiver's heart. And, there's a story in there about a woman who thinks her mother doesn't know who she is anymore. But it really was about teaching her that it's not about knowing and recognizing. There's a difference between knowing who you are and recognizing who you are. So a lot of it really does address the caregiver and the family members' hearts as much as it does the person with dementia.
Oh, yeah. That knowing and recognizing is such, people take that so personally. And then so many people say, well, she doesn't know, so you don't have to show up.
Right.
But I found people said that to me because they were so uncomfortable not knowing how to help me with that.
Exactly.
So, I'll just tell her, don't go. And then we don't have to have this discussion because I'm so uncomfortable with it.
I don't have to hear it. Exactly.
Yeah. Yep. And I was fascinated kind of by those. I had two sets of camps. One that was like, no, just I'm uncomfortable with this as your friend. So let's not talk about this. And this is how I can guide you away. And then I had the other ones that really wanted to know, who were really supportive. And it was just asking they would all ask the same questions. How are they doing? But they were coming from really two different angles.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not in the book, but I wrote a blog, on my LinkedIn, my social media the other day about the question everybody would ask us, does your dad still know who you are?
Yeah.
And Dad always knew who we were because of his dementia. But that is such a line in the sand. It's such a moment of negativity. Like, does he know who you are? That we really should change the question is, does your dad still know how you make him feel? Does your dad still know that you love him? Not who you are, but how you make him feel. And then the question becomes very different. Because if I ask you, does your dad know who you are? And you have to say no, the heaviness of that on you answering and them asking. But if I said to you, so does your dad still know that you love him? Now it's now it's a totally different question and not that level of heaviness and that amount of loss. It's more of what you're still able to bring to your dad.
Yeah. Well, and people with dementia, have, and I think this is a perfect example. They, because we rely on words so much, those yes, no answers and versus kind of multisensory engagement. But they always talk about how their brain is like Swiss cheese and they just don't know moment to moment where the holes are going to be and how to connect. And when we use that multisensory engagement and really looking at them as a whole person and slowing down, so like, what are their eyes saying to me? What is their body language saying to me? We can see that they are reacting to us maybe when the words aren't there anymore.
Absolutely. And that's so much more important. I'd rather my dad hold my hand and be calm and content than call me by my name and be upset and agitated. So the name, again, but we get so wrapped up in that part of the disease. It's like all of a sudden, like you said, if they don't know who you are, then they matter. And if they don't know who you are, but they know how you make them feel, then they matter even more. It matters more to show up.
Yeah. I had a friend when I was younger and their uncle had dementia. And my girlfriend's husband, the person with dementia, would always refer to him as the lady at the train station. And Bruce was like 6'4", but he had long hair, it was in the 70s and stuff. And he was always the lady at the train station. But Patty said, Bruce doesn't care because he's got a smile on his face and he's interacting and he's happy, he's carefree, he feels safe. Who cares?
Exactly. And in the book too, there's, this story about when my son Connor went to visit my grandmother and she talked to him about him My son, who was 5 at the time, is saying, I love dinosaurs. And my grandmother saying, oh, my Connor loves dinosaurs. And just to watch this 5-year-old go with the flow and just accept wherever she was at, warmed my heart beyond, it's like, I did something right. This is good. He gets it.
Well, kids understand because they're not out to judge. They're out to play and interact.
Yep, absolutely.
And so they just take it where it's at. I remember, my daughter only knew her grandma with dementia. And, when they were, I don't know, mom or Danielle was probably 3 to 5 years old. And my mom really wanted to watch Danielle. That was really important. And Tom and I were like, oh
no.
But we thought, well, they're not going to go anywhere, and I'll get them some McDonald's or something for dinner. And I set up, kind of some things on the dining room table for them to do. And I'll never forget Mary walking in, and there's Danielle and my mom coloring. And when I walked through the threshold, they both held up their coloring. You couldn't tell who was prouder. And my heart just melted because they were just so engaged and so in tune with these huge smiles of what they had both produced,
Because neither of them had any judgment, any expectations, any inhibitions. It was just, let's enjoy the moment.
Let's have fun.
We can learn a little bit from children and others.
Oh, I think we can learn a lot from them for sure.
Yeah.
We're going to take just a brief break. I want to talk to you a little bit about Q for Good. They are my webmasters. I absolutely adore them. And I know a lot of people get frustrated doing their websites and stuff. And so if you're looking for somebody, check out Q for Good. They're so detailed, so timely, so friendly, and I have hair because of them. I'm not pulling it out, which I know sometimes we all get really stressed out with that stuff. So I always like to give them a plug because they make my job so much easier by supporting me in the fashion that they do with that. So, Mary, our conversation is just, I always love talking with you. You're just a ball of joy and so comfortable to talk to and engage to because you're so.
I can say the exact same about you, Lori.
And that you just come from such an authentic place, and we don't always hear that all the time. A lot of times people trying to guide us or support us are in a rush, and they're kind of going down their checklist of what they were told they were supposed to tell us.
Right.
And, I can tell you're talking from the heart, you're talking from experience, and that's huge. Now, one of the things with your book is how the heck did you pick your stories? Because over 35 years, being in the field, you got stories.
Caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest journeys, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm Allison Schreier, and my experience caring for my husband inspired me to create Zinnia, a therapeutic streaming service designed to support people living with dementia and reduce caregiver stress. Zinnia offers research-backed videos intentionally created for people with dementia, engaging, calming, and easy to follow. Whether you need to ease agitation, create moments of joy, or make daily routines smoother, Zinnia is here to help. Family and professional caregivers use our content to turn challenges into opportunities for connection. Accessible by subscription on mobile devices and connected TVs, Zinnia is simple to use whenever you need it. Because when caregiving feels easier, life feels better. Go to zinniatv.com and sign up for a free trial today. Use the code RESOURCE for 15% off an annual Zinnia subscription.
There are stories. There are a lot of stories. And I think it was, I could have written hundreds, but I wanted to make it the whole journey, again, from the very beginning of the diagnosis through the disease and just very similar lessons about emotion. So it was, the years of thinking about the book. I actually, in my phone, would have titles and I would throw titles in like, okay, you know what? Missing slipper and just would throw in the titles. And then as I sat down to say, okay, we're going to stop talking about writing a book and we're going to write a book. I went through the titles and figured out which ones went together, which ones maybe were duplicate kind of lessons and themes, and which ones maybe, I needed a story for somebody later in the disease process or a family member that wasn't as close. So it really was about picking stories that would span the whole journey and span the different relationships, because the book is not just stories from my perspective of my journey with Dad, because that's one journey. It really was a lot of, there's a story about a niece who wasn't really close to her aunt, but found herself to be the only one left, which is a very different story than our story with our dad. So it was finding, again, stories that were relatable, some stories that had a little bit of humor. That was probably the hard part, trying to put in humor, but in a very respectful way. And again, from the beginning of the journey to the end. And I wanted to also share a story about, people, as they read the book, I think there's going to be stories they read and go, oh, I came across that, and boy, I didn't handle it right, or I didn't do it well. So I wanted to make sure I included a story of a time where I completely screwed up. And let me tell you, there could have been more than one of those stories. But it was a story just to say, you're not going to be perfect. You're not going to get it right. Give yourself grace. Because I think if just filling a book with stories about when I got it right would have been a disservice to people thinking, oh my gosh, I'm getting it wrong. We all get it wrong. And you pick up the pieces and move on and give yourself grace. So it was a lot of, again, figuring out what stories went together, different angles, different parts of the disease, different family dynamics, so that the book really can be for anybody.
I really appreciate that, because I think people do think, oh, they got this down. Nobody ever has it down. Like, I don't even consider you and I or Teep or anyone to truly be experts, because I think we are always learning. We might have more knowledge base, but we are all still learning.
Absolutely. And
constantly.
When I do when people introduce, and I'll send a write-up and they'll send it to me to look, if that word expert is there, I want it. It's like, I am not an expert. I am a specialist. Again, I understand it, but I think that's where probably this administrator comes. When you think you're the expert, then you don't seek out more knowledge. You don't seek out new ways. I love following people on, LinkedIn and social media groups, and think, oh my God, I never thought of it that way, or here's a new way to look at it. So I don't ever think I will be an expert, but if people want to use that word, they can use it on you, Lori, but not me.
No, I don't like that either. I think it's too daunting. I mean, the number one thing I think that every care partner wants, and I think probably every person with dementia wants, is more patience and how do I adapt graciously.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's what I hear over and over and over again from, if I'm speaking on one-on-one or support groups or conferences. Those are the things that everybody wants more of. And it's like, you know what? It's not just with dementia. It's about every part of your life. We all want more of that. And I think part of that, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, I think is because we are moving too fast.
I think we're moving too fast. We want instant gratification. We want solutions. We want answers. It's, we want a very black and white world, and dementia is about as gray as they come. And I think the hard part is what works today may not tomorrow. What didn't work it's just this constant flux, which I don't think, again, we as a society kind of handle well. It's, somebody will ask a question and you go to your phone, you get, hey Siri, what is the capital of whatever? And you instantly get the answer. And with dementia, there are no answers. There's suggestions, there's ideas, there's moments, but there's really no answers. And I wish, my one wish for caregivers and families, I wish they would give themselves as much grace as they give the person they're caring for.
Yep.
And because we're not going to get it right. My dad had, dementia after 25 years of doing this in the industry. And some of the things I did and went, oh, I knew I shouldn't have said that, but it happens. Give yourself grace.
That's very true. Because people do just beat themselves up sometimes, or just fight. I think, some of it is changing, from that mindset to heart set. And one of the problems that I hear all the time is, oh, they repeat themselves all the time, or they they keep saying the wrong thing. The doctor's appointment is Thursday at 3. It's not Tuesday at 10. And, blah, 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 blah. And they feel compelled to this right or wrong mode of, and I just keep telling them, no, that's not right. It's this.
Right.
And doing the therapeutic fibs or the fiblets, therapeutic line. So many people, disagree with that. And I had one woman when I was out east said, I can't do that. It's against my religion. I have never lied and I'm not going to lie. And I said, that is your choice. All of this is your choice.
Right.
I said, but how do you want your person to feel? Do you want them to, relive a death over and over and over again? Is that your goal?
Right.
Because if that's your goal, then keep telling them.
Keep doing it. When people who say to me, oh, I don't lie, I never lie, it's not the right thing to do. It's like, okay, did you ever tell your children that there were certain people who exist who maybe really don't? Or, we do it to our kids and they're like, yeah, but that's to make them feel better and to give them good memories. I go, well, that's why you're doing it for the person with dementia also, to give them a solid, good moment. But I think for families, it's this fork in the road that they have to admit, if I have to lie to my mom, if I have to pretend that dad's alive and he's not, what that really means is I have to admit that mom is as bad as I don't want her to be. So if I can just get her to understand the truth, then she's not that bad and it's okay. I think a lot of it is just the family's need to hold on to mom is normal and mom is okay. And the only way to do it, again, mom, what is my name? Mom, don't you remember dad died? Because those are the things that will make the family feel like mom is still okay. Mom is not that progressed.
That's an excellent, excellent point. Mm-hmm. And the denial is big on both sides, from the person diagnosed many times to the family members, and everybody's at a different space, and process. It's kind of like grief. Some will deal with it quickly. Some will never, ever deal with it.
The reality is, and I think for professionals, the thing we don't understand is that it is a grieving process. And the first step, no matter what, is denial. Mm-hmm. So when we as professionals talk about, Lori's going to need that memory care unit, and we talk about it and we approach the family and say, okay, looks like mom needs memory care. And the professionals are like, I can't believe they're in denial. That is the first stage of grief, no matter what we tell them. And some might be in grief for a day, some might be longer, but that denial is that first stage. And as professionals, I think it's shocking that we still are surprised that families are in denial.
Yeah. I did a program, oh gosh, it was probably a year ago. I can't remember the title, but it was about denial. And we took a break and came back, and one woman came in and somebody said, oh my gosh, she was outside just bawling. And they said, I asked her what was wrong. And she said, I'm in denial. I didn't think I was in denial. But we went through all these different types of examples of, and that it is normal.
Absolutely.
It is totally normal and everyone does it. But she really had no clue with that. But I think there's this stigma with being in denial, especially when you are maybe a type A personality and you always think you're in control. Denial's not in your vocabulary,
And there's a difference in, a lot, and even the title of the book, The Heart Remembers, because this is an ongoing battle between your head and your heart. Mm-hmm. So your head may not be in denial, but your heart might be. And it's a strange dynamic to be like, I know my mom has dementia, and that's the heart speaking. So it's the head and heart constant battle. And, a lot of times, again, when professionals say, well, they need to understand, it's like they do. Their head understands. So we don't need to educate their head. We need to let their heart catch up. Because, again, the denial isn't happening in the head usually. It's happening in the heart.
Yeah, that's a wonderful, wonderful way to put that. I also wanted to have you talk a little bit about your company and tell people, that you ventured out on your own and how you might be able to help them with that as well.
Absolutely. Yes, I did venture out on my own. It's been just about a year now. Talk about denial and what it was going to be like to run your own business, as you know, but it's called Empowermentia. A combination of empowerment and dementia, which are two words that people often don't think belong together, which is why I put them together, because, my company is really about empowering anybody on the journey, whether it be a family member, the person themselves, an organization who's providing dementia care who wants to do better, a restaurant that wants to learn how do I, work with people who have dementia in my restaurant. So it's really to empower people.
Caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest journeys, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm Allison Schreier, and my experience caring for my husband inspired me to create Zinnia, a therapeutic streaming service designed to support people living with dementia and reduce caregiver stress. Zinnia offers research-backed videos intentionally created for people with dementia, engaging, calming, and easy to follow. Whether you need to ease agitation, create moments of joy, or make daily routines smoother, Zinnia is here to help. Family and professional caregivers use our content to turn challenges into opportunities for connection. Accessible by subscription on mobile devices and connected TVs, Zinnia is simple to use whenever you need it. Because when caregiving feels easier, life feels better. Go to zinniatv.com and sign up for a free trial today. Use the code RESOURCE for 15% off an annual Zinnia subscription.
To raise the bar for memory care, no matter what it is. So I do a lot of training for organizations. I'll do, program development and review to go in as an outsider and say, okay, this is what I've noticed in your program from an outside point of view. I do a lot of, for families that have their loved one at home, I'll help them resource services, get more services, train a private aide. I have to say that's probably one of my favorite things to do because I love to train. But when you're training a group of 30 professionals or 30 people, you're training from the macro point of view. But when I'm in a home, I'm not training about dementia. I'm training how to communicate with Lori, how to engage Lori, how to get Lori to take a shower. So it's just much more gratifying because the results are a little quicker than when you do a big group. So anything that a family might feel they need in regards to dementia or an organization, I may not be the right person for them, but they can start with me. And I have, tons of resources to get people into the right person. I do some cognitive exercises with people who, live remotely and don't have access to maybe an adult day or programs. And virtually, I'll do some cognitive exercises and programs with them over the phone, over Zoom. So, it's anything I can, I will do.
Oh, that's fantastic. And we love that you're part of Dementia Map too. And
yes.
Joined our community in that fashion. Now, one of the things that I wanted to ask, so you speak and you train and you consult, and I mean, it sounds like you are open to a little bit of everything. And that's one of the things that I love about you. It's like, what are the needs out there? I mean, you're actually listening and asking and engaging people to be able to deliver things in different fashions.
Yep. One of the great clients I have here is they are a community that they're independent living. They have no memory care, no dementia care, but we all know what independent living looks like. So, have consulted with them, reached out, and they actually have started an adult day program within their independent living to meet the needs. So they're still independent living. So I think people who say, well, we're not in the memory care business. If you're in the senior care business, you're in the memory care business in some level, in some way. So how can we meet those needs?
Yeah. Well, and it's such a gift to be able to have that support in, if it's market rate or if it's assisted living or whatever it might be, because it allows the person who doesn't have the cognitive issues as well to stay in that living environment longer. It allows them to live together longer, which is, one of the things that I hear from couples and partners all the time is I don't want to be away. I want to maintain our relationship as long as I can. And by doing that, that encourages that. So, it's changing the look and the feel, but it's acknowledging that it's okay. And I've always found it interesting because, I've run up against that with professionals, like even with Dementia Map, people are like, well, all you need is memory care. And I'm like, you guys are the first to say cognition issues in about 80% of your population in all of these other areas exist. We have to acknowledge that. We have to embrace that. We have to not make people feel embarrassed about that.
Oh, yeah. The independent community I'm in, it's so interesting to see the switch, because when I first went in, there was like, oh no, like there's like anybody who had any memory issues were like locked away in their apartments. They didn't want to come out. They didn't want to. Now it's like a tsunami of people just talking about it, and they're asking for more sessions, and they're supporting each other. They have a support group that they started in the community. They're doing a walk this fall for the Walk to End Alzheimer's. So it became this closeted topic. Not that it wasn't there, because it was there. Now there's this comfort to support one another and have these out in the open conversations.
Yeah, there's such a freedom and a beauty, and that social connection that everybody feels accepted, because so many people fall away, once this hits your family. And to be able to have that cohort that really understands, and now all of a sudden you can ask your neighbor, say, I'm going to go run and get my hair done. Can I leave Bob with you? Because they get it, and Bob and George sit and chat, and Betty's cooking supper or whatever going on at the time, and they just support one another. I would personally love to see a developer take on, and I'll never forget this. This was, oh my gosh, this has to be probably close to 15 years ago. I was down in Florida speaking, and a woman approached me. Her and her husband were builders and developers, and then he got dementia. And they did a whole blueprint of a community. And I couldn't really approach anybody here in Minnesota because it wouldn't work in our particular weather. But they made cottages, one-level cottages, kind of in a round. And they had like a social building, and it was gated so nobody could wander off. And the garages and entries were outside that. And, they had this whole thing set up where people could live together, and maybe, they could live cheaper, versus two of them going in different directions. Maybe they could support one another, where if they couldn't afford adult day or even sometimes home health for those little things, they could support one another until they really, really were in a pinch and needed to spend those funds. And, every time I would talk with, groups about this, they're like, oh my gosh, we would absolutely love that. And then even coordinating like with home health care, they could have one company that comes into the community, which hopefully would drive costs down, versus everybody picking and choosing their own companies. It'd be a better use of time. And I mean, they were very, very thoughtful in terms of how they designed it, because they lived it, and they talked with so many others who wanted something like that. And I still have not seen anything like that out there. Have you?
I'm very candid, because I'm pretty honest. I think the biggest risk, the biggest obstacle, is that companies don't want to take that risk. Like there's such this balance of, we have to keep the person safe. Like I think a lot of organizations, companies think that's the number one priority. And believe me, I think safety is important, but not at the expense of quality of life. To have an open setting where people can kind of walk around and go wherever. Some communities are like, oh, you know what the liability is for that? You know what the risk is for that? And I think we have to put the priority that safety does not mean good dementia care. And it doesn't mean good quality of life. So I think it's getting companies to balance that, the fear of risk and the need for independence. And we're just so not there yet.
Well, and I think part of what this company was trying to pull together is it didn't need to be called memory care.
Right.
It was independent living in a community for people in that situation that were going to handle things themselves, but we were going to have a few rules. And so, but again, businesses don't look at that. And I mean, you can easily put clauses in, to protect themselves with that this is an independent community with an association, and this is just how we're designed.
Exactly. Yep.
And we encourage to keep costs down for the association to pick who the home health care is going to be. You can opt out, but we believe that we can keep our costs down, and those people could be an active member educating people, because you don't want anyone to feel forced or taken.
Right.
Just like when you get discharged out of the hospital, they're like, you can pick anybody you want. No one tells you that anymore. They're just like, we're going to assign you to this, and you may or may not get a follow-up call because they're very, very busy. I mean, I just ran through that with 2 people I was dealing with. And, after 3 weeks, someone said, well, we just can't take anybody. Well, then call me and tell me that.
Right. Give me the choice. Communicate with me.
Yeah. And so I think there's different mindsets, but I also think, the cookie cutter, design, everyone thinks it's cheap, it's easy, it's fast. But again, cookie cutter doesn't meet the changing needs.
Right. Exactly. And I think too, seeing, having been in the industry as long, when I first worked in the nursing home, many of the people that came to the nursing home 36 years ago are the same type of people are living at home now.
Mm-hmm.
The people that were coming to assisted living, there's just been a shift. Community and home-based services is definitely, I think, the way that things are going. Here in Connecticut, a lot of nursing homes they're not calling it downsizing, they're calling it right sizing. They're reducing their number of skilled beds because the desire is that people want to stay home.
Yep. And the transitional beds are going up and things. I remember having a kind of a disagreement with my mom was in a nursing home, and I was just livid. We raised these funds, and we built this like beautiful waterfall and this big patio out front. And all of a sudden we hear these rumors that they're going to really switch to more transitional care, and all the transitional care is going to have the view. And everyone with dementia is going to the back of the building that has an alley and a fence. And I went in and I said, who do you think you are? And he's like, well, I'm kind of the executive director. And I said, you got this all wrong. I said, I was very active at doing this. You guys didn't even think it was possible to do, blah, 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 blah. I said, and now you're going to put all the people in transitional care who have to get up typically and do therapy and walk. And that's part of their journey to look at that. And there, and then you're putting everybody who has to live there and doesn't have any other opportunities to live in the back. I said, you better do something with the back if you're not going to move them to the front. And they couldn't move them back to the front. And I said, because you're really doing a disservice. And I just kind of chewed him a new one. And we had that relationship where I could just be really honest with Doug. And he got on the phone that night with his executive director. And he says, oh my gosh, Lori's got me thinking really different. We got to do something. And the next, supervisor said, well, I'm going to talk to my wife because she's a master gardener. Because I said, you have 3 feet between the alley and the fence. And I said, I've been buying, little bird feeders and things for the squirrels and the hooks and stuff. And I said, you better get some more out there and plant some flowers that will come back. I said, and make that look decent. I said, this is shameful. And they did.
Good.
They got on it right away. And, it was just like, think big picture style, but everyone thinks of just pitching, who they're selling to, the social workers, the families, and instead of explaining the whys.
Caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest journeys, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm Allison Schreier, and my experience caring for my husband inspired me to create Zinnia, a therapeutic streaming service designed to support people living with dementia and reduce caregiver stress, Zinnia offers research-backed videos intentionally created for people with dementia, engaging, calming, and easy to follow. Whether you need to ease agitation, create moments of joy, or make daily routines smoother, Zinnia is here to help. Family and professional caregivers use our content to turn challenges into opportunities for connection. Accessible by subscription on mobile devices and connected TVs, Zinnia is simple to use whenever you need it. Because when caregiving feels easier, life feels better. Go to zinniatv.com and sign up for a free trial today. Use the code RESOURCE for 15% off an annual Zinnia subscription.
Right. Behind what you're doing. And to me, that's just massive.
And I think it goes back to the whole attitude, which, again, I know I don't have and you don't have, and a lot of us in the field don't, is that it's not going to matter. It won't make a difference. They're not going to know. I went to one community and I had a little hissy fit myself. It was, went in to do some consulting, and I looked at the menu for the traditional assisted living side. And then I looked at the menu for the memory care side, and they didn't match up. And it's not that the memory care one was bad, but I was like, why aren't they the same? Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, well, the memory care get the leftovers from the day before. Mm-hmm. I was horrified. And again, it's that attitude of they're confused. It doesn't matter. But that's the people we need to fight for even more, because they can't fight for themselves. So we should be fighting for the better meals, the gardens, the views, the programs, so whatever it is, because they deserve it. They need it and they deserve it.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny when you speak up, like with Doug and I mean, we just had a great relationship. And then, he would always ask me different things like, well, what other ideas do you have? All of a sudden it opened up the conversation, and he's just like, you just look at everything from a really different perspective. And I think so often communities like, well, we have our suggestion box, or, they can always get a hold of us. Well, you can't, and that's how most families, I think, feel, that they're not really heard. And, from there, we were able to do basically a family council, which they couldn't get off the ground. And the council was built, I said I would run it when they asked, but only under one circumstance that I needed them to fulfill. And I said, every month I want a different director. And they're like, well, why? And I said, I'm talking maintenance. I'm talking housekeeping.
Food. Yep.
I'm talking everybody. And it was amazing, the changes that were made that were so simple, how the complaints went down. Staff and family got along much better because we were alleviating these frustrations and these miscommunications that many times just never made it from A to B to C. And the rate of volunteer in donations went up, because people were working as a team.
And I think that's, it's not an us versus them. It's not the nursing home versus a family. We're all in this for the same thing. We all have the same outcome. Again, how we get there might look a little different, but, we all want what's best. I mean, these are, when I looked at it and the people I work with, I think about, did I give them the best last day on earth? Mm-hmm. Because the reality is it might be. And what do they deserve and what would I want? And it's just thinking that they deserve the quality of life right until the very end.
Yeah. Well, and again, getting into that team sports type thing, one of the things, and again, I don't care if it's a nursing home, an assisted living, a market rate. We had people volunteer because family members were master gardeners. Yeah. They didn't have, they had someone cut the grass, but everyone else like weeded and took care of the plantings and, volunteered to even make those purchases, and people donated money for, glider swings. And I mean, it was unbelievable what happened when people felt heard and part of the plan versus
right. Exactly. I often tell when I do training for nursing homes, assisted livings, I say, what happens is we think we have to call the families with the solution to the problem we need to call them for the solution, because the chances are they have the answers that we don't, because we don't know the person. And I think too, with the disease being the way it is, for families to be able to almost their way of taking control, some way of giving back and doing and contributing in a way to fight the disease, because you do lose a lot of control when this disease takes over.
Yeah, and that is so helpful. So I'm really excited that you have broken off onto your own, that you've written this beautiful book called The Heart Remembers, and launched your Empowermentia to help staff and families alike. And it's just amazing work that you're doing, Mary. So thank you for spending time with us today. Is there anything that we haven't discussed that we should have?
The only thing is, you can get the book on Amazon. It's at Walmart. It's at Barnes & Noble. It's all online. And just so people know, a portion of the proceeds from every book gets donated to an organization that supports either research or services for people with dementia.
Oh, fantastic. That is wonderful. And again, her website is empowermentia.com. You can email her at memorycaremary@gmail. I love that email. And then again, any place you normally get a book, you can go ahead and find it. You also have a Facebook page and LinkedIn page that people can connect and follow you and connect up with. So much. I hope that our audience, I always ask you to be a giver of hope. Like, click, and share the show. It's not because I want numbers. I've never believed in that. I just want information, good, solid information, to be accessible to people in need. And there's a lot of people in your sphere of influence that you have no idea is even dealing with this, or worried it's coming down the pike. And the more information that we can get out, and the easier we have things to listen to or read and learn from and prepare ourselves, because most of us aren't getting by this unscathed. It might not hit us personally, but it's probably going to hit somebody that we know and love.
Oh, absolutely. It's, I often say, when you talk to a family member, you talk to people, say, do you know somebody with cancer? The answer is almost always yes. Do you know somebody who's had dementia? The answer is almost always yes.
Yeah. I know when I speak, and I haven't done this for years, but when I first started out, I was always kind of feeling it out. And I could have an audience of 1,000 people, and I would ask 6 questions in terms of, have you been affected, by, it could be a mom, a dad, an aunt, an uncle, a neighbor, whatever. And I would have everybody stand up initially, and then as they were touched, sit down. And we could have a room of 1,000 people. And if there was 6 people left standing.
Absolutely, yeah.
Was just, and people were just shocked to be able to see, physically see how many people are touched, because again, this isn't a hot topic. People are, they're scared about it, and we have to take the fear out and show them there is real support.
Absolutely.
On a very authentic, compassionate level that understands and isn't going to judge you, and help lift you where we can, because none of us are perfect, like you said.
Give each other grace, and it's nice to see there are so many good, reliable resources out there now for people.
For sure. So thanks again, Mary, for your time. It's always a pleasure. To our audience, we want you to check out not only Mary's site at Empowermentia, but also Alzheimer Speaks. We have all kinds of free educational resources, as well as our sister company, Dementia Map, that has some global resources. And a lot of people think, why do I need global resources? And it's like, let me tell you, we wouldn't have memory cafes and dementia-friendly communities that are extremely popular and on the rise if we weren't talking globally, because those were not U.S. concepts. So, have the conversation, because you just might have one of those concepts we need to hear about, or can help spread the word about them. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great week.
Bye-bye.
Caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest journeys, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm Allison Schreier, and my experience caring for my husband inspired me to create Zinnia, a therapeutic streaming service designed to support people living with dementia and reduce caregiver stress. Zinnia offers research-backed videos intentionally created for people with dementia, engaging, calming, and easy to follow. Whether you need to ease agitation, create moments of joy, or make daily routines smoother, Zinnia is here to help. Family and professional caregivers use our content to turn challenges into opportunities for connection. Accessible by subscription on mobile devices and connected TVs, Zinnia is simple to use whenever you need it. Because when caregiving feels easier, life feels better. Go to zinniatv.com and sign up for a free trial today. Use the code RESOURCE for 15% off an annual Zinnia subscription.